Ladies and gentlemen, today's guest, Michelle Kooi. I'm super excited for this conversation for lots of different reasons, but for everybody listening, Michelle for a long time was my CPA. And so I got to know you, at that capacity of kind of the professional CPA to business owner relationship. I think we worked together for a couple of years.
Yes.
And since then, you've left that firm. I know you're still very involved in the CPA and kind of accounting world. In fact, you were just telling me a little bit about when you're going to be speaking at that at the CPA conference you were telling me about. But it's a totally different role now in terms of the services that you're offering and the expertise that you're bringing, which I'm excited to talk about and dive into. Where I want to start, though, is because I know that you've transitioned, and for everybody listening, Michelle owns Confluence Coaching and Consulting, and you specialize in one-on-one coaching for women business owners. And I loved that you specialized even further to women business owners with ADHD, which is just, I love. I've got ADHD, so we can probably, commiserate about that for hours. But I think it's interesting because generally speaking, CPAs, not to bash on accountants or anything like that, but generally speaking, CPAs don't have the personality of a life coach, a business coach, an entrepreneur, or all of these things. And I was reading your bio, and you kind of touched on a little bit of this transition moment for you. I'd love to start there, if you're okay with it. I'd love to hear that story of, because I think you were spending 10 plus years maybe in the CPA world before finally taking the leap and starting your own business and doing this coaching thing and all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. I want to hear why. I want to hear that journey. I want to hear sort of, how all of this has come to fruition for you.
Yeah. First, thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be here. So it has been a journey. So that's a great word, to say the least. So it really started actually back in 2010. I've been thinking about coaching since then. And I had a client in 2011 ask me to coach her. And didn't really know anything about coaching at the time, but I discovered that I just was naturally actually already doing that for my other clients. I just wasn't charging for it. I didn't even realize I was doing their bookkeeping, I was doing taxes. But this other piece of it, and really, I just fell in love with. And I wanted to do that, but I really didn't figure out how to make that happen. I went through a health coaching training. I had some health issues back then in 2012 and got that certification, but didn't really do anything with it. I was like, what the heck does health coaching have to do with being a CPA? And later I kind of merged the two. They came together for me a little bit later after my second burnout. I was like, okay, health is super important, actually, not only for myself, but the small business owners that I'm working with. And so it just had that in my mind, and I just kept thinking about it more and more. And so some of the consulting work that I was doing before with clients I really loved, and I had a few coaching clients when I was in public accounting, but that's where my passion is, and that's just what I wanted to be doing all the time. My soul wants to do that, my brain wants to do that, and I just was tired of looking into the past and dealing with all of the details. I still wanted to help small business owners. That's what I've done for the last 20 years.
Right.
I just wanted to help them in a different capacity and work on mindset and helping deal with some of the things that are really challenging, in addition to the just getting some of the financial things done. It's helping them really learn how that can help them. And so it's a bit of a combination of coaching and consulting, depending on the client. I do have clients who are CPAs and bookkeepers and financial advisors, so obviously they don't need help with any of that.
Right.
We work but we work on their business, and we work on on themselves, on a lot on self-confidence and self-worth and time management and things like that.
It's so cool, and I'm getting more of an insight into the coaching world. And first of all, I just think it's neat, and I want to talk more about it, that you had the courage, and you'd mentioned about kind of I don't know, your passion being in this more so than the CPA world, and it's evident. I can see it and feel it. And when we ran into each other at the SBDC, networking event, it was so cool to just see you in this different element, in this different zone. But I can tell that it's where you're supposed to be. So it's neat, it's refreshing, and I think that there's something for that. But I'm curious, because it seems to me like some of it is that you were experiencing these things that sort of then led you to learning, the things now that you coach. You'd mentioned there when you were speaking about your second burnout. I'd love to hear more about that. Like talk me through, because burnout, and then I'd love to talk about burnout even, because, well, it's just so prevalent nowadays. And I want to hear about it, but I'd love to hear more about specifically your experience with burnout. And you had mentioned obviously that there was two of them, and one of them I think was a catalyst, or three.
There's now, I mentioned two, but there was a third one after that.
Talk to me about that. Talk to me about burnout, but specifically, through the lens of your experience with it and how it sort of has led you to here.
Yeah, I mean, I am it's been really challenging. Like each one has been different, but what I've come to realize, and I didn't at the time, I didn't have the language for it, and burnout wasn't even a term that we even understood 14 years ago when it first happened, but of just doing all the things that society says I'm supposed to be doing everything my industry says I'm supposed to be doing to be successful, and just killing myself, like literally, like to the point where I feel like this is not sustainable anymore. At the time, I had young kids I had teenagers at home, and that's challenging enough. And my marriage was falling apart at the time, and I was working just insane hours, and the company I was with had grown and grown and grown, and I had started working with small business owners, and I was now working on public companies. So completely different. And so I was completely disconnected from the client. And one of my values is connection. I didn't put these together at the time, but I was feeling really isolated because I was doing the back end work, but I was never getting to meet with the client and speak with them. And that piece of that was very important. But basically the first burnout ended. I was exhausted. I had adrenal fatigue, and but you bounce back when you're younger. As I got older, it got harder. The second time I hit burnout, I had, after I left that company, I had started my own business and doing bookkeeping and taxes for small business owners, and had that and loved that, and discovered I loved business development and some other, and that's when I started doing some coaching. But I felt, again, isolated just being on my own, and really wanted some the collaboration was missing that I had before, so I went back into public accounting, and it was not a good fit. And after a couple of years, I ended up with just leaving from burnout, but I came down with shingles, like in my 40s, and I was like,
wow.
What? Like, are you kidding me? So that was a sign that, I really needed to do something different. And at that point, I was, thinking I would get out of the industry, but I had so much experience in it, and I was constantly getting recruited, and I had kids in college, and the timing just didn't seem right to make a change. And so when I moved to Durango in 2017, and worked for a firm that I worked really well with for a while, and then I burned out again. And during COVID was, hard for everybody, but accountants were especially, pardon the term, taxed, because we had more work than ever. And so, some people got a little bit of a break during COVID, and we did not. We were working insane hours, and my staff was suffering, and I could tell that, and I just felt helpless and kind of hopeless. And at that point, my health was suffering, and I was really starting to think something was seriously wrong with me. And I just decided that, now is the time to move on, and I'm not getting any younger, and this is what I've been wanting to do for a long time. And I I made the move. And so I did it incrementally. I did that part-time. I had my own business part-time and went to work part-time for another firm for a couple of years. That's when I was working with you. And then last year made the full switch.
To go full time, yeah.
And so it's been a wild ride. I say being a small business owner is like being on a roller coaster. And, there's nothing like the transformation owning your own business can do for you.
Right. Good and bad.
Good and bad. It's, one day you're kind of freaking out, is this going to work? And the next day you're on top of the world.
We took new team headshots at the end of last week. And as part of that, we were looking at our old ones. And the old ones were taken like month 4 of business, for Brittany, my partner, and I, and some of our team members that were here from early on. Our headshots were, from very early on in the business, and then these new ones. And the team was giving me a hard time that I look different. And I was like, well, yeah, I've been aging in dog years ever since I started my own company, Like, I know that's only a 3-year-old picture, but it feels like 30 years ago because of, I've aged since then. I was obviously joking, but very sincere too. Of, these journeys of, as a business owner, the highs are so high, the lows are so low.
Yes.
The stress is tremendous. Just recently, we had a partner that misforecasted, what my cost was going to be for that month, and it was, sent me into a spiral. It was devastating. And then, of course, it was an error, and it's like, no problem. And I'm like, oh my gosh. But I lost a couple of years of my life over that, So I'm curious because, and I know, from the coaching world that you get to help people through all sorts of things. And I just think it's such a refreshing take on it, this idea of, sort of redefining success and a healthier approach to all of these responsibilities that we have and, as business owners and things like that. My assumption is that burnout is amongst those somewhat commonly. And I'm kind of just curious, with your own experience and your advice to anybody listening, tips or tricks to avoid burnout, or what to do if we're feeling it?
Yeah. I mean, space is something I talk about a lot, giving yourself space, space to think, space to work on your business, not just in your business, space to rest, and space to play. I have like 3 things that I like to talk about is having structure, having support, and having self-care. Are so important. So really, those are kind of the foundational things that I work on, creating the structure so that you're organized, you're building that foundation. And so that includes like knowing what your, having a mission statement, knowing what your values are, your personal values, and also your business values. And that helps you make decisions easier. Like, we can get decision fatigue easy with a million different decisions we have to make. But if you're very clear on what your boundaries are, it makes those decisions easier if you're gauging them against that. Having healthy boundaries and not saying yes to everything, like figuring out what is really important and committing to that. And that can be really hard. Yeah. Really hard to do.
Especially for small business owners that have to make revenue.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, so the next thing is support is like, we may be in business by ourselves for those of us who are solopreneurs, but we don't, for ourselves, but we don't need to be in business by ourselves. Right. And so that's where getting support, whether that's, instead of doing your own bookkeeping, hiring a bookkeeper, instead of trying to do your own taxes, getting a CPA, instead of, getting a coach to help you in those moments when you're on that roller coaster, and bring you back up so that you spend more time, in a good mental space.
Right.
And kind of helping guide you and talk through things. Like, oftentimes we don't, you could run things through your head, but it's another thing to talk things out with somebody else and help. It's like that visualization, except like verbally, like talking it through. And like, you can almost answer your own questions sometimes when you do that. And so getting support, again, whether it's marketing, like what you do for business owners is huge, because, when business owners are very first starting, they're trying to do every single thing themselves. And, they may be good at some of it, and they may like, many of those things, but there will always be something that they hate and they are not good at. And those are the things that should be delegated first.
Yeah, I love that. Even if you're in business for yourself, you don't have to do it alone.
Right.
Whether you're a solopreneur or an entrepreneur or, a small team or a big team or whatever, I love that idea of support. I'm working right now on, I'm going to do I'm a breakout speaker at the economic development conference next month.
Wonderful.
And I'm working on I ran a 100-mile ultra marathon in March, and I'm working on these parallels.
Congratulations.
Thanks, of, with that and like life and mindset and all this stuff. And it's actually very challenging to build this presentation, so I'm stressed about it. But one of the things one of my bullet points in it is that you can't do it alone. You're going to need crew. You're going to need an aid station and all these things. And then I apply it to, business and that thing, those ideas with support. I love that because, it's somewhat lonely. Like, unless you're a business owner also, I'm not sure that the general population understands how enormously hard and stressful business ownership is. Like, the other day I was on a run. I was a little stressed, and I did a post that was basically like, nothing will compare to the stress of supporting a family of 5 when you sign your own paychecks. You know what I mean? Like, it's a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
So when it comes to those support ideas, what's generally your advice on where to find it, how to find it? You had touched a little bit on the things that you're not good at or the things you dislike, but talk to me more about proper ways of seeking support. What should that look like for any entrepreneur that's listening?
Yeah, I mean, having conversations, like, whether that's meeting people on LinkedIn, going to networking groups, talking to, being in conversation with other business owners and getting suggestions on, what they're doing, who they're working with, and, following people and getting on just finding someone that resonates with you. So it's not just someone who has the expertise, it's someone who there's an authentic connection, that you like someone that can feel you're going to really work well with, and that you just resonate with. And so it can take some time to find that person, and sometimes they'll show up in the most unlikely places. Right. I have a couple people in Canada that I'm working with now that I would have never met, just talking around here, but I met them online, and it's just been amazing.
Yeah, it's so cool. Yeah, and the idea of a coach, I've shared on the show before, but I hired a running coach a while back, and I had been running for probably 10, 15 years, and I finally hired a coach, and my ability skyrocketed. Like, it was wild what happened once I had a coach with a plan, an accountability partner, and all those things. And I always use that as kind of an example of, how valuable it is really to hire a coach or to, go through this process with somebody else. Because even if all the information's out there or the answers are there, that dynamic of a coach, it just changes the way that it's approached. I feel like, I don't know if that's, if you feel.
Yeah, well, accountability is a major reason that people hire coaches. So even if it's like, you feel like you already know everything there is to know, but you still, which, you probably don't. There's always more to learn, right? But that accountability piece, just knowing that you have you're meeting up with someone, and you had, quote, homework or action items from last time, and you want to get it done. Like, they're holding you, and there's all kinds of different ways to design what that looks like. What works for one person doesn't work for another. Accountability is not the same for everybody.
Right.
But it's huge. Like, that right there changes your mindset and how you look at things and how you start prioritizing things.
Yeah, so different when it's like, I'm going to have to tell them I didn't do this versus I don't have to tell anyone that I didn't do this,
Right.
Have to say it out loud or, go to the meeting unprepared.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious. And that's not the end of the world. Like, I mean, it's not uncommon that I have clients show up and they didn't finish all of the action items.
Of course.
But then we have a discussion about what happened, and it could be something else absolutely valid came up that was more important.
Right.
Or, and
I was
priorities
stuck on
changed,
it,
or I'm really stuck on this, or I started to work on this and I got really emotional. Like I got really upset. Like I couldn't finish it. Like, and so there's a learning in it, whether it's done or not, but that accountability kind of brings that to a head.
Huge, yeah. I'm interested because we talked earlier on. I know you specialize in women-owned businesses, and then that further specialty in ADHD. I'm fascinated with that. Talk to me about why. What are the unique challenges that come with somebody that's an entrepreneur and has ADHD? Because I'm living it, but I want to hear from you.
A pretty good size percentage of entrepreneurs have ADHD.
Not surprised.
Because we don't fit in the box. Right? So I have ADHD. But I was just diagnosed last year.
Fascinating.
But I, at the time, so when I decided to start marketing to women with ADHD or business owners, and I have clients who don't have ADHD, but I kind of just looked at my client list and realized that 85% of my clients had ADHD, whether they were diagnosed or not. They either knew they had it and didn't care to get a diagnosis, or they did have it. And so I was like, interesting. And at this point, I didn't even know that I had it. And then something else prompted me. A conversation with a friend prompted me to go get tested. And so it was like, okay, this kind of makes sense. And why that's kind of, you kind of attract, like attracts like, right? So unbeknownst to me, even at the time, So, but time management is a big one. Imposter syndrome, which that can show up with, whether you have that or not, but just low confidence, because people with ADHD often have trouble following through with things. And so that can lower the confidence, and then the next time it just sort of goes down. So that's why I work on that, on self-confidence and self-worth with those. Just being organized. Money can be super challenging. Handling personal finances or business finances.
Right.
If it's something that if you have ADHD, there are superpowers attached to that, and if it's something you're interested in, you can go nuts. You can get hyper-focused and you can be super productive. But if it's something that you aren't interested in,
not gonna happen.
It takes the heat of 1,000 suns to get you,
if then
to get you to do that. And then that's where that support can come in, right? Like, you don't want to work against yourself. Like, is it literally worth all of the energy that you have and then some? That's, again, feeds into the burnout when you're trying to do things that you are just not wired to do, or that just drain you.
Right.
So I talk a lot about I have this energy assessment that I do with people, and identifying those things that give you energy. Like those of us who like running, I love running as well, trail running, and or things that drain you. Mm-hmm. And so, and recognizing what those things are, and then when you're fitting those into your calendar. Because if you're trying to do a hard thing at 4:00, in the afternoon, if you're a morning person, that's going to be that much harder because your energy level is lower.
Right.
You want to kind of match the task to the time when your energy. So it's sort of matching that. And then when you're going to have a little bit lower energy, matching something that's easier, or that you could kind of do in your sleep.
Easy meaning something that comes naturally, or easy as it relates to personality traits? Like
easy just as far as brain power, like it is either physical energy or mental energy.
Got it. So if you're, I don't know, like I'm an extrovert. I like, making the phone calls or having the sales meeting or whatever.
Yeah.
Schedule that. That for me doesn't take a ton of energy.
Right.
I enjoy it. It's no problem. But if you ask me to work on a presentation, for example, tremendous amount of energy.
Yes.
So I schedule that when I'm at my more
fresh.
Yeah, okay. Mm-hmm. More of the morning time or whatever to each individual.
Right.
But it's
right.
specific
and an
to
introvert might do the opposite. An
right.
introvert might find that networking super challenging, and so
right.
they might want to do that at a different time.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah.
You had talked about that just kind of the energy drains with ADHD specifically. And I thought it was interesting that you brought up imposter syndrome. Quick anecdote, and I want to hear you unpack more about what that means. But I'm just talking about this presentation because I worked on it today, which was like a big deal for me because, as you know, with ADHD, deadlines drive action. And I've got a few weeks until I actually have to present it. So the fact that I was working on it today was a big deal for me. But I was telling the team, I was like, I feel imposter syndrome because anywhere else in the world, this could be this incredible, and it probably could be here, but this idea of the 100-miler in business and the parallels. But I'm especially nervous because it's going to be in Durango, and it's not that unique here to run ultras and do the whole thing. I was like, you put me in anywhere else, put me back east in Tennessee or wherever, and people's jaws would be on their floor about how uncommon it is. But I'm nervous about doing it, especially in Durango. So anyway, it's very relevant right now, the conversation of sort of that imposter syndrome and energy and things like that. But I'm curious your take on just your perspective of imposter syndrome and tips or tricks, ways that people should, approach when they're feeling like they don't, when they're feeling imposter syndrome.
Yeah. So, I mean, it can be really, not devastating is not the right word, but feel really heavy and affect our energy. It is really when we just begin to doubt. We doubt, even though our resume may say, all of these things that we've done, we've accomplished all these things, it's something we're experienced in. There's just something about it. It's this external validation that we're looking for. It's this, it's this perfectionist. There's a little bit of perfectionism that's in that as well. I grew up a competitive gymnast, and the perfect 10 was that was the score that you were working for. They've actually changed the scoring system since I was there. Yeah. But it's about being perfect. And so, I fight against that. But if you grew up like expected to get straight A's or something, like that can just be wired into you at a very, very young age. And so perfectionism can come into that. And so, but what you think is perfect and what other people are going to, get out of something is often two different things. And so, what is good enough, recognizing what good enough is. And, again, just, getting support, like talking to, whether it's your spouse or a friend or a coach, like somebody who believes in you, to remind you, of things. I mean, I talked with somebody the other day, and I have I can't remember what she called it, but it's basically a journal that you can keep that you put when you get positive things that are happening. You get, thank yous and comments, and whether it's testimonials or a card or appreciation, or, somebody says something about that, you put that in this journal as kind of a reminder to remind you, because it's easy to forget. I mean, I have this exercise that I have clients do on Fridays. They're called Friday reflections. And it's basically looking back at your week and not looking at what you didn't accomplish, looking at what you did accomplish. Because we can get so hung up on what we didn't accomplish, and then we can beat ourselves up and take ourselves down. But even if, at the beginning of the week, we think of all these things we want to get done. At the end of the week, have we finished every single one of them? Probably not.
Definitely not.
Right? Like our list, I don't know about you, but I have more ideas than I have time. And my to-do list is not humanly possible.
Right.
Right? But looking at what I did get done, because I'll think, this week was, I didn't get this done, or I had this happen. Like today, my computer crashed in the middle of the day, and I was like, what? So how am I going to navigate this? And, so you kind of, you see all the things that didn't go so well, but taking the time to look back and look at what did go well. And you're like, oh yeah, I did this and I had that. And so you go into the weekend feeling pretty darn good about your week. And you also spend the time, you also look at the things that maybe didn't get done, and do they need to be rescheduled? could they be delegated, or could they be ditched? Are they important? So it's kind of like do, delegate, or ditch,
Right.
I like to say, right? And then just like also, what did you learn this week? Like, we're always learning. I love learning, and I think it's super important for anybody, but especially as a business owner. There's always something new, and there's, that we can bring into the fold.
Yeah. And what a powerful exercise of those. I think you called it Friday reflections, but especially with the emphasis on, looking at what you did accomplish or what went well. It's an interesting thing. Negative feedback is so much heavier than positive feedback. Like I look at, my business reviews, for example. I've got one negative review, and it wasn't even justified, but it's there.
Then
and it was like
it just crushes you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd probably take 15 positive reviews to overcome the one negative review, or and it's interesting. I think that's such a powerful exercise for, the entrepreneurs that listen. And a lot of my audience is, entrepreneurial minded, type people. Because the other reality that I've experienced, at least, is that nobody says good job. Like nobody's like, great work today. There isn't anybody to say
you don't
that.
have a boss.
Yeah.
You are the boss, right?
So there's not the you're the determinate. You decide if it was a good day or not. There isn't, which some people I think really need, affirmation. And so anyway, an exercise like that, even if it comes from yourself, of looking back on the week, my guess would be too that those Friday reflections also contributes to being able to kind of separate and now have a weekend. Like set it aside, a punctuation mark.
It does. And also part of that exercise includes planning for the next week. So that when you show up on Monday, you don't instantly have to jump into where was I, what was I doing, and have to make a whole bunch of the decisions first thing on Monday.
Right.
You already have your week planned and your day planned, and you know exactly what you're going to be doing.
Yeah.
And so it just makes for this smooth entry on Monday, and this nice exit on Friday.
Yeah, no, I love it. What great advice. Like if that's anyway, I can tell, I can visually see, I can tell how powerful of an exercise that would be.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, go ahead.
I was going to say another thing is to not look at your email first thing in the morning.
Why?
That pulls you out of yourself and into you're like in immediate work mode. You haven't allowed yourself time to reconnect with yourself. So, I like to not even look at my phone for hour and a half after I get up. Like some people, don't have that much time, but even if it's only 15 minutes, like you normally would look at it first thing, taking that 15 minutes, whether you meditate or you do a little bit of yoga, or you just sit and drink your coffee and sit out on your porch and look at the birds, like something to just settle and connect your nervous system, so that you're not jumping in, because we can be triggered by things. If you get your phone and the news pops up and there's something that's happened, you're like instantly triggered.
Right.
And that can affect your entire day.
Right. Yeah. How interesting. And it probably ties into that. We were touching earlier on, the realities of burnout, how common it is and things like that. I've often considered the pros and the cons to the connected world that we're living in now. On one hand, I love it because it's always on my phone. I connect with people, I engage, I prospect on social media. I mean, it really contributes positively to my life.
Yeah, it's convenient.
But on the other hand, it's awful. And it drains me, and I'm always connected, and I never get a break. I mean, I'm the guy that checks his emails in bed. Like I'm not even up yet, and I'm on my phone seeing what emails have come through, and I know it's so unhealthy. So I'm curious, because it all kind of ties in together. It seems like there's these sort of balancing themes that you've touched on with burnout and the Friday exercise, Friday reflections. Slowing down, not checking your emails in the morning, these things like that.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of curious your take on how it all works together, how it kind of all combines, or just even, best practices of because what I'm getting at is you had also mentioned earlier on this idea of self-worth with entrepreneurs and, a lot of the people that you work with and what their relationship is with their self-worth and things like that. And I would love to hear kind of your take or your perspective on, how closely everyone should be tied to their businesses, or if distance is good, and, how you define your own self-worth, how that all ties into all of that.
Well, self-worth is kind of the foundation to self-confidence. You can have self-confidence without self-worth, but when you achieve whatever it is you're wanting to achieve, if you don't have that self-worth, you're going to still feel unfulfilled. You're like, I hit 6 figures, or I did this, or I got that promotion, or I landed this client. Why don't I feel better? Right? So, or you can have self-worth, but not self-confidence, and then you're holding yourself back, or you can self-sabotage yourself. So they're foundational. They build on each other. But all of these different things that I'm talking about in creating this space and just taking care of yourself. Like as a business owner, you are the foundation of the business. I mean, you may have support, you may have some employees, you may have contractors that do things for you, but being resourced and being healthy emotionally, mentally, physically is so important. You just show up more clear. You show up more vibrant. You show up more energetic. You show up more resourced. So taking breaks, taking vacations, taking time off. I mean, it's one of the reasons I love going out in the wilderness is because then I don't even have the option.
Actually disconnected.
Right?
Yeah.
Disconnecting, going on a river trip or something where you don't have a computer, you don't have a phone, you don't you're just out there.
Right.
And, it can take it can feel a little weird for a day or two.
Or a lot weird.
Yeah. You can be like, I don't know what to do with myself, or you feel like an appendage is missing, you know? And so, but once I did a 3-week river trip on the Grand Canyon a few years ago, and it took 4 or 5 days. I began to just really drop in. And when I got off that trip, I looked in the mirror for the first time, because of course you don't have a mirror on the river.
Right.
I looked like I'd reverse aged 5 years.
Really?
My whole, the muscles in my face were relaxed more, my eyes were just bright. I was just so connected with nature and myself and the people I was with, and I got so much rest. It just made a huge difference.
I think until we're actually disconnected from,
you don't even know
this, you don't realize how intrusive it all is.
Right.
We very recently, last spring, went camping with my family to Moab, and we camped down at the bottom of Cane Creek. It's one of my favorite places. It's beautiful.
Yeah, love Moab.
No service down there. And it was weird for me. I've got the kids, I'm usually working and whatever. And it was one of the best weekends of my life because there was no service.
Right.
Nothing remarkable happened. No, it was just a standard camping trip in Moab. But I was so much more present with my family.
Just going to use that word, more present.
It's interesting. So, this isn't a therapy session, but you said something that just floored me there. I tend to be a very hard go-getter. You know me well enough that, I'm like, what's next?
Yep.
I'm also a very confident person.
Yes.
But I just figured out right now, my confidence is tied to my accomplishments. My worth is not. It's different. And
yes.
I think that if I could work on my self-worth more so than my self-confidence, I wouldn't have to tie it always to what I did today or what I did this week or what sales I brought in or what my revenue is or how much money I'm making or whatever. What a fascinating thing to consider too, for me, especially when it's because I feel like you had mentioned that self-worth is sort of that foundational component, to it all. And when I'm disconnected, there's not those metrics of accomplishments. Right. You're just you. You're just there. You're worthy, you're with your family, you're being the dad or whatever. Mm-hmm. So that's something that I'm going to take away from this conversation, because that was a fascinating way that you worded that, of the relationship between self-confidence and self-worth, and how the two present themselves. I'm deeply fascinated with that philosophy. So I'm going to be exploring that for sure.
There's a fabulous book on that topic called Worthy. So.
Awesome. I'm writing it down. Yeah. How fascinating. Yeah. So tell me about then, because there's balance with all of it, especially with business owners. And when I share people kind of tying it into, the idea with ADHD and being an entrepreneur and business owners and, your role coaching people like that, best way I could explain being a business owner with ADHD would be, I've got 100 things I need to do, 1,000 things I want to do,
yes.
and 4 I'm gonna do.
Right?
Like which has also contributed tremendously to my success because I have these big ideas and these huge ambitions, and I'm like, but so much of that's from this ADHD nature of the life that I'm living, and
it's like massive creativity and expansion. Yeah,
and then you've tied in these elements of rest and disconnection and balance and these things like that, which I agree wholeheartedly how important they are. It's so conflicting though for somebody with ADHD. You combine those concepts of like what it's like being an ADHD entrepreneur, how important rest and disconnectivity is and stuff. Just talk me through kind of best practices or usually your advice, to the small business owner with ADHD of how to force some of that, or like the tips and the tricks to make sure that they have the rest or the disconnection or whatever.
And rest can look different for different people. It doesn't mean for some people it's taking a nap,
like actual rest,
right?
Yeah.
Like for me, like getting 8 hours of sleep every night. But it can also be just resting. Again, I go back to the nervous system because it's really all about our nervous system and our brain, like all the energy. And so getting out, like all the technology and all the connection is constantly like this input. And so when you get out in nature and you are disconnected, even if it's just for a little bit. I trail run because again, I'm out like on the Colorado Trail or whatever, like out in the woods. Like you're not close to that, even if it's just for an hour. Like that's rest for my brain, even though my body is running. Right. Like, and you're a huge runner, so you get that's a different kind of
it
rest,
actually is meditative, yeah.
Going like my partner and I were just in Oregon a couple weeks ago on a camping and hiking along the Oregon coast, but sitting around is not something that is easy to do for either one of us, and so we go for walks on the beach or reading a book, but there was always like feeling like you need to be doing something but we need to be also focused on the being, not just the doing. And the being is more of that presence. And when we have, like, multitasking is overrated. Like, it's hard to do multiple things well at the same time. And so having focus on one thing, even if it's just for 15 minutes or 30 minutes, like I love co-working, or body doubling. I don't know if you've heard of that. Like, it's basically whether you do it online or in person, you meet up with somebody on Zoom, for example. You maybe have totally different businesses. You're working on totally different things, but you state what you're going to work on. So there's a little accountability, and then you turn off your camera and you turn off your mic. Zoom's still on, but you can't see or hear the other person, and you work on what you said you were going to work on for 45 minutes.
Interesting.
So you're focused on that one thing. And then you come back after 45 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever you decide the time is. And you're like, hey, how did that go? You check in with each other. And then you go into another head down 45-minute session on maybe the same topic if you didn't finish, or a different one. And then you come back. So it's 2 hours. And I do this every couple weeks with a gal in Albuquerque. And we get more done in that 2 hours sometimes than we get done in the whole day.
I believe it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so helpful.
And that ties into that kind of accountability piece. And that's what I think is so interesting is you've got kind of these, like, I don't know if structures are the right hacks, maybe, to use but these little tricks of like, you know what needs to get done, or you know you need to do these things, you know, structure it that way, and it'll increase the likelihood of it actually happening, which I think is fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I use the word structure a lot, and I've described it as sort of scaffolding. Like, what scaffolding do you need to hold up the building of your business? Like, what are the pieces that you need to help you? Being busy, it doesn't mean you're productive.
Yeah.
Right. So sometimes that gets there's a misalignment with that. So
Right.
just because we're busy doesn't mean we're being productive.
Hurry, boss is coming. Look busy. Act busy. Yeah. Right. Off camera, you were telling me about this speaking engagement you have coming up, and I think that the title of it, or at least what you had told me, was redefining success, and tying in these elements of kind of authenticity and things like that.
Yes.
Tell me about that. Talk to me about the traditional definition of success, the value of redefining success. Walk me through that. What's the value in redefining success?
It's huge. So we're told all these things that society tells us that we need to have to be successful. We need to have this kind of car and this kind of house, and we need to make this much money, and we need to have the corner office, and we need to have just need to have attended this kind of school, and all of these things. But really, we can define our own success based on our values, and based on the things that are most important to us. And I feel my best when I am X. Like, what am I doing when I'm feeling my best? Like, those are the things that can go into that, so that you make sure that those things are happening. Because if you achieve all these markers that society says that you need to have, you might still, people rise to huge levels of success, making millions of dollars, and then they're like, this doesn't feel like I thought it was going to feel. I still feel empty. I still feel unfulfilled. Like, what is going on? So it's a deeper level, and defining those things. And it could be that you can redefine success and get there much more quickly.
Right.
You still have goals. You may not have reached the money that you're wanting to make, or your dream home, or your dream vacation, or whatever it is, or the family that you're wanting to have. Those can still be goals that you're working on, but they don't define you. They don't define. You don't have to wait to feel successful until those things happen. You can feel that now.
And I love it. So I've had Dr. Doug Miller on a few times.
Yes.
He's a psychologist.
Yes.
And he's actually mentioned almost the exact same thing.
Oh, really?
That when we first define our values, align our life to those values, and then live that life, that's in and of itself success. I'm curious. So anyway, it's great to hear, the affirmation of, that idea works kind of across the board. And, you guys have different audiences, but the same concepts. And so anyway, I think that's amazing. I'm curious though, you talk about like those values and the difference between sort of societal norms in terms of what success looks like versus how individualized this redefinition of success could be that you're mentioning. How do you advise people to go about finding out what their values are? Because that's step one, and then we align with those values, right? So how do we?
There's a number of different ways to do that. I mean, that's something that I do with my clients. That's an important piece of what we work on in the time that we're working together. But you can, you can find a list of values online and look at that and go through and circle 15 or 20 of them, and then pare that down to 10, and then pare that down to 5. Really, like, your top one should be 3 to 5. Like, you can't focus on 20 things at once.
Right.
Like, even though you're like, oh, these are all important, and so, really notching that down. You can also look at, I tell people to look at their bank account, look at your bank statement. Like, often what we spend money on are things that we value. Somebody who values health, their bank statement might show that they they go to, like Natural Grocers or Whole Foods or something like that, and they have a gym membership, or they have a running coach, or they have, these different things that are reflect, or supplements that they purchase that reflect health. So your bank statement can also show things that you spend money on that might be important, right?
Interesting.
And it could also be just looking around at the activities that you do and the people that you're with, what your spirituality is, and what things. Another way is to look at the opposite, is when do you feel really frustrated, or angry or upset? Like, what things trigger you in that way? That could be that your values being violated or not honored, and that can create huge frustration.
Fascinating. So the idea would be you figure out those values, which exercise, through some process, you can figure out what those values are. Get to your top 3 to 5, but a small number of values. And then you adjust your life in accordance to those values.
Yeah, you can start, setting success statements for yourself based on those, and based on including those, but just, again, back to the things that when you're feeling your best, the things that you want in life. Like when my partner and I are, truly feeling connected, like that's, might be something in there. That's like relationship success.
Right.
Right. So, it's, it can take time. It's not something that you're going to just sit down and do in an hour. It might take several months even but you start thinking about it and start kind of just recognizing, like, is there a value in this?
Yeah.
And just kind of connecting dots, like just something those of us with ADHD are pretty good at. Right. Connecting the dots with that, and seeing what shows up, and then starting to prioritize those things.
Yeah. And how
But your business values can be similar, but have some differences as well. And so having those and sharing those with your staff and your clients can help people make that authentic connection a little bit more.
Right.
So they really truly see what you stand for and what you represent.
Yeah. And we talked about it early on, just the commonality now of burnout.
Yeah.
My assumption would be that if you're living a life that's aligned with your values, the likelihood of burnout is so much lower.
So much lower.
Because you're probably burning out because you're doing things that aren't aligned
exactly
with your true values.
That's like my last burnout was I sort of made that connection of, I was super frustrated about some things, and that became apparent that, this value is being violated. This value is not being honored. And that is like at my core, that's like part of who I am, and I can't express that. I can't use it. I don't have this in this environment. Like, that doesn't work for me.
Yeah, there it is right there. That's so interesting. Of it redefining success, which is living a life aligned with your values, also enhances the likelihood of longevity. Because there's these other themes that I see in entrepreneurship content, or these things that I consume, and one of them is this idea that instead of trying to win the game, the goal is to keep playing the game.
Yeah.
Like, to stay in the game, to keep stay in business, to keep playing,
Yes.
whatever. Which I would say then means not burning out, not quitting, not
That's sustainable piece. Like, is this sustainable? That can be a question that I ask, people. Is what you're doing sustainable? Like, there's periods of time where, yes, we have a deadline, we have a big talk that we're giving, and we're working, we're just giving it our all to get that done.
Have the extra cup of coffee, get it done, sure.
Or we're going on vacation and we've got all this work to do before we leave, or we have some launch of something that we're doing, right? There's where we're writing a book and we have deadlines with our publisher, whatever it is. There's those, but if that's always going on, like, is that sustainable?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So recognizing like there are periods like, balance, work-life balance. I used to say balance is BS because it's, things are always moving and shifting, right? But it's not necessarily the time. In each place, there's, each has its own moments, I should say, but that there's over time, there's balance.
Right.
It's not like every day I'm doing this for this many hours and I'm doing that. Like, but over the longer picture, like, because things ebb and flow, there's cycles, there's seasons, there's rhythms. And so working with that and following that, we have different energy levels at different times of the year. Like with the sun in the summer, it's all like, excited and energized, and we're up later and we get up earlier, and, but in the winter it's dark and it's cold, and, there might be more introspective times to work on different things. So we can plan kind of some different things we're working on based on, based on the seasons, based on the light, based on, all kinds of different things. Some people follow the moon cycle. Some people just know their own energy cycle. If you have deadlines at the beginning of the month, for example, like a bookkeeper who, like, the 1st to the 15th is really busy for them.
Right.
Right? Because they want to get everybody's books done and closed. And then they work on other things the other part of the month. So it's just knowing, like, how does your business work with that, whether it's seasonality or some sort of rhythm, so that you can kind of match your own rhythms to that.
Yeah. And then you can keep playing the game.
Yeah. Exactly.
Which is the whole goal for anyway.
Right.
And be happy.
Because if you're going at 115% all the time, at some point, like, your body will make you slow down.
Right.
Right. That's when we get sick, or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
It forces us.
Well, and that's what's so cool to see about your story is that you took control and made some of these changes, and then now helping people through it. And I know we're not perfect, but just experiencing, it seems like a lot of it was not aligned with those values, and like making those shifts and making that switch. It's like I said early on in the intro, I can see how much better you're and not to say that you were doing great, but I can just tell that there's this fresh energy about you now.
Yeah.
Doing this new line of work and getting to help people. So it's just cool because it's kind of it's evidence, that the philosophies and that the systems actually work, because I've seen you living it too. It's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I've been building myself back, for 3 years. I mean, I did, I left because I felt like it was time, but I also, I was ill. Like, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition at the time that I left. Like, I worked myself literally into the ground.
Right. Literally.
Yeah. And so I have been working to restore myself ever since. I'm very big into alternative medicine. So I've just been trying to do it slow and, again, sustainably and naturally. And so I'm finally back to, like, I didn't trail run the last couple of summers because I was still just not feeling it.
Right.
But I'm back this summer and feels awesome.
Yeah, I love it, and I relate so much to it. I've seen similar transitions for me, whether it's battles with anxiety or whatever it might be. Is these little shifts in life and priorities and these things like that are contributing to living a rich life and a fulfilling life and hopefully a long life and all these things. But to keep playing the game, to come back to that same analogy. But it's cool because for anybody listening, it's definitely possible.
Yeah. And some people, you hear, oh, well, admitting that you need help is weakness, or whatever. And it's so not. Like, admitting that you need help is something to be honored, and I just commend anybody who reaches out, whether that's going to get therapy, or hiring a contractor to help her with her business in any shape or form. Like, it's going to help you keep playing the game.
Yeah, exactly. Michelle, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for sharing some of your wisdom. But bigger than that, thanks for having the courage to take the leap yourself, and for, putting yourself out there, and for, aligning your life with your values so that you can keep playing the game. Because when you're playing the game, you're helping others too. And it's just so fun it's so fun to see, the impact now that you're able to make on all these people. And, I love the fact that you're especially helping, women and these things like that, that group of people I kind of hold in some of the highest regard, working women and entrepreneurs and especially, mothers and these things like that. But
Yep.
Anyway, I just want to thank you because you're making an impact and I want to give that credit because you probably need to hear that more often that, the line of work that you're in, it matters and it's meaningful and we need more of it because we need more entrepreneurs staying in the game and
Yes.
small business owners sticking it out and, healthy workplaces and all these like ripple effects that can happen from, from your line of work. And so I just want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I have a picture, you used the word leap, and I have a picture of a frog on my desk, like a green frog when I was making that I cut out and put on my desk right around the time when I was making the decision to take the leap.
Yeah.
And I still have that frog on
How
my desk.
cool. Yeah, so cool. So I've got one of my shirts for you. They're my Inspire by Example shirts.
Thank you.
Because you are inspiring by example. And so just thank you so much for doing it. I really appreciate it. I got to tell you how much I've thoroughly enjoyed getting to know you and today's conversation and all of that. So just, Michelle, thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm just so excited about what you're up to and how you're helping people. It's really awesome. And, your race that you've done and, everything that you're doing as you're growing your company. So kudos to you. And thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you.